This is WGVU DT11 Grand Rapids and WGVK DT5 Kalamazoo on channels 35 and 52, services of Grand Valley State University.
Questions, numbers will be on your screen.
It's a great time here to get things planted up.
Oh, please join us. It's a question. Hi, I'm Shelley Irwin, and thanks for joining us for Ask the. Tonight we're talking with authors, so here you go. Call in if you're quite a character. How's that? Most of you are. The numbers will be at the bottom of the screen. Joining us tonight are local authors. Good that you are here, Brian Plachta, you and your good work. Sue Merrill, appreciate you, a recognizable name when it comes to you having your history with the Grand Rapids Press and, of course, how you are spending your days now. Hi to you, Sue. And Kenneth Craigle, glad you are here. I think you're a first-time author. Congratulations. Thanks for joining us, of course, you. All right, let's do a little 101 on your book. Talk to me about your Pillars, Brian.
Sure. Yeah, Shelley. Pillars of Steel is a book that I wrote kind of coming out of my own journey of running into the man code, basically. And so it's an attempt to, on men's spirituality, to say that we're in the middle of redefining what masculinity is. And so it offers a fresh perspective on what masculinity is, how do we get to where we're at, and how do we break the man code. And it replaces it with something I like to call manarchy, which is the new redefinition of men that we're evolving into. So it gives some practical tools, but also a history of men's spirituality and men's masculinity.
Is this your first book?
It is, yes.
Good.
Yep, first one that's been published, correct.
Nice, good.
Yeah.
Sue, share your work, please.
Okay, well, since I retired from the press 3 years ago, I published a memoir, which is about my career with the press and with other newspapers and some of the famous folks I talked with. And in some ways, this is a memoir as well, although this is fiction. Great News Town is a mystery thriller, but it was inspired by a summer when I was working in Joliet, and that summer 14 people were killed by one person. And so it's really about what happens to a small town, what happens to a small newspaper when it happens.
Great.
So that's what it's about.
2 books out. Ken, share your story, please.
Well, I wrote and illustrated a children's book. It's called King Arthur's Very Great Grandson. And it's about a little boy he's the great grandson of King Arthur. And on the morning of his 6th birthday, he goes out looking for adventure. And he encounters a dragon, but the dragon turns out to be friendly. So then he finds a cyclops, but the cyclops turns out to be friendly. And then he encounters a griffin, and the griffin turns out to be friendly. So he goes down to the sea, where he encounters the Leviathan, and that's where the whole book sort of climaxes.
Great. And then my first question to all of you, how do you come up with your storyline? Let's start with you, Ken. And of course, you've got a double duty. I mean, that's your penmanship there with your illustration.
That's right, and that's how the story originated. Was I was trying to develop more illustrations for my portfolio, and I drew a picture, just a sketch of a boy and a dragon, and the dragon was sort of friendly looking, and then the boy was looking sort of frustrated, like he wanted a fight. So that was the genesis of the story right there. And then I drew a few more pictures, and then from there I started to see the general outline of the book.
Sue, is it your plan to eventually write somewhat of a memoir?
The memoir was not part of the plan. I always wanted to write mystery thrillers because I read them all the time. And so that was always on the back burner, that I was going to do that someday. But the memoir just happened because one Thanksgiving, my father was ill and he had a caretaker, and the caretaker was asking questions, and I started telling stories about the people I'd interviewed, and he was just enthralled. You know, my parents have heard all these stories 100 times, you know, but he was just, he just couldn't get over that I talked to Tom Wopat a dozen times, you know, and so I thought, you know, maybe somebody would be interested in a book about this.
Yeah.
So it's
Good.
been fun.
Brian, did you always think you'd write a book? That's not your first career, I understand.
Yep, I'm an attorney by my day job, but I've always had that passion to write. And I think for me, the inspiration and what really brought Pillars of Steel to life was James B. Nelson is probably one of my favorite authors. He's a men's spirituality author. And he says that writers don't write because they know something, but they write because they are searching for answers and they're willing to struggle on the page to try and find the answer. And so Pillars of Steel was really my struggling with two questions. One, how come we have to live by this man code, number one? And number two, how has the women's movement, in a very good way, impacted men, but also caused us as men to realize that we are in the midst of a redefinition, because when women change, men are bound to change too. And so it was a historical aspect of wrestling out loud and say that men are really in an interesting, you know, time frame, basically. And then for me, it was to, okay, given that reality, what are some solutions that we might offer? So for me, it was kind of that personal struggle of, because I've got four children, and
Oh,
it's
you
like,
almost forgot one.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
3 boys and a daughter. I can't forget my daughter. Exactly, yeah. And the aspect of, you know, if we are in this redefinition of masculinity right now, because women have found their proper role in society, but now men are kind of struggling, what kind of a world are we offering to the next generation if we as men and women don't go through this cultural redefinition and be aware that we are there right now? So,
What would you brand yours of? And I'm just going to be real layman termed here. Would this be a self-help book? Would I find it under that?
At Schuler's, it's in the spirituality.
Okay.
It's really a men's spirituality book for both men and women, basically. I think it gives women, my wife, as she reads it, says, oh my God, I didn't realize that's the world you live in, which is so different than mine. So I think it's a good insight for women, but it also, particularly for men, so it would be in the spirituality section of Schuler's, for example.
So both of your books, did you have friends and acquaintances read as you continued to write? What was your process here?
Yes, I did. Actually, the memoir, not so much. It came together kind of quickly, just based on clips. But Great News Town was worked together over years, and lots of reporters read it. Because part of what I'm trying to capture is what it's like to work for a newspaper. And so it was very important to me that that rang true.
Great. We're going to take a caller from you. Hi, a question from you, caller. What's your question, please?
Yeah, I just wondered what Sue Merrill's memoir's title is, and if it's available locally.
The name of it is Laughing for a Living, and yes, it's available locally. It's both books are available at Schuler's, and you can also order it on Amazon.com.
Great. I think all of your books are available locally, right?
Yep, correct.
Ken, what's your process of writing? Do you sit in your own little room with the door closed and keep the family away, or do you?
Yeah. That's kind of important. My son's 1.5, so he can be kind of distracting. Yeah. But yeah, I sort of, when I'm developing a story, I sort of flip-flop between the illustrations and the text. And that's something that's really great about writing and illustrating is you don't have to rely on just when I can't find the right word, or when I feel like I'm getting too lengthy with my descriptions. I think, well, I can work that into the illustration a little. So I flip-flop back and forth and develop the story that way.
Great. Another caller on the line. What's your question, please? Hi.
Hi, I was wondering what would be the best way to go about getting your book published?
All right, that was on my list. Let's talk publishing. Let's start with you, Brian.
Sure. My book is self-published. I worked with a local buddy of mine who has been in the publishing industry, and I kind of looked for an agent, put it out there, and about 3 of them took a serious look, but they said, you know, you're not John Grisham, and you're not published, and we'll look at it later when you got something under your belt. So I, just out of luck, quite frankly, I read an article about a local publishing company, Principia, and contacted them and really went the self-publishing route. And for me, It worked for me because one of the things that I'd like to do as an author, the book is really a signature for the workshops that I like to do. So it's not, for me, just about the book. It's about really taking the book and using it for workshops and classes and stuff. So that was helpful. So that's the process that I went through, was the self-publishing, basically.
Yeah. What was
I know your journeys have been a little
Yeah,
different, too,
yeah,
haven't
talk,
they?
Sue, about your journey.
Well, I'm also self-published, and self-publishing, I don't have the figures right off the top of my head, but it is astounding in the past 5 to 7 years how much self-publishing has mushroomed, and largely because it's a good way to have more control over what that book, how that book turns out, and to make more money on the book when you sell it. I've self-published, I went through Lulu, which is an online method.
That's Lulu?
Lulu.com.
Okay, L-U-L-U?
L-U-L-U, and that worked well for me. I do believe very strongly in professionals, and so I have a designer for the covers. I have a copy editor who reads everything and works with me on it, and so you've got to have a professional product here. You can't just throw it together. But self-publishing is a growing field, especially when you consider ebooks. And you can, I mean, I'm selling these books all over the world.
Great. Before we take a break, how about your story, Ken?
Well, with children's books, there's a great organization you can join called the Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators, SCBWI. And there's chapters, local chapters all around. And so that was, early on, that was one of the things I did. I joined them for picture books and for young adult novels. This organization helps to sort of educate potential people who want to get published and connect the people who want to be published with editors and agents and art directors. It's a really useful organization, and that got me up to speed really quickly and put me in contact with people that were helpful. So
You were not self-published, correct?
no, this is published by Candlewick Press in just outside of Boston.
Great. I'm going to take a quick break, show you what's coming up next week. Right now, Ask the Author. And next week, Ask the Green Expert, talking on sustainability and that kind of greening. So stay tuned. Right now, of course, Ask the Author with us, 3 local authors in studio. Their books, of course, available here locally, and we'll talk about that. Man, let's talk about the big R word. Brian, were you rejected at all by any? I know you're self-published, but
Sure.
talk about I guess rejection in the field of publishing, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think my initial, I was looking for an agent that was interested in men's spirituality topics. I'd like to write a series of 3 or 4 books on this. And yeah, it was hard. I submitted it. My buddy who used to work at Zondervan's had suggested these 3 agents. I provided them with manuscripts and actually had one great hour-long conversation with an agent. He was excited and da-da-da, and then he changed jobs and started his own company. And when I called him back, he said, yeah, come back to me in a year or so, I'm in a different. And that hurt. I mean, it really was difficult. I think what was helpful to me is I belong to a writers group, Word Weavers, and so it was good to be able to go back to that group that meets once or twice a month and really share that, so you're not isolated as an author. But I agree with Sue too. What I did was, and I basically I hired a professional editor here in Grand Rapids to take my manuscript and really polish this, and that was kind of my first step too, to make sure I had it professional as I could. And then that's kind of where I decided to do the self-publishing. I think I felt I could beat my head for the next several years trying to find an editor and or a publisher. But I realized, I'm just going to get the book out there. Yeah. And I was real pleased with the process. It was pretty exciting. So
I know all 3 of you have had book signings, have some coming up. We'll get that on the map. But Sue, do book signings work? I mean, is that something you need to do?
Book signings, sometimes you can be sitting there all by yourself. I find that you need to do a lot of preparation. You need to invite folks. You need to do some mailings. If you get some people, you know, a crew that's going to be there, that helps. And I usually, if possible, do some reading from the book, because the book sells itself when you read from it. It's a lot, you know, it's like different than just sitting over in the corner. I've done a lot of sitting over in the corner, and that's not really a good way to sell books.
You bet. Hey, another caller on the line. Hi, caller. What's your question, please?
Hello?
Yes, welcome.
Yes, my question is, it's like when you're writing and you have all these floods of thoughts that's coming in, and how do you let your fingers keep up with all of the thoughts that's coming in so that you can get it down, whether if you're writing in longhand or on a computer? Is it better to use dictation, but, you know, because you just have so many thoughts coming in and you want to get them all down, and how do you do that as a writer?
Yeah, Ken, let's start with you.
Well, that's a good question, because I find that sometimes you almost feel a little panicked when you suddenly have an epiphany and you want to, you know, really capture what sounds so good. For me, when I have an epiphany, it's usually not that good 5 minutes later. So I've learned I don't need to panic as much, but in the moment, I just try to write it all down as fast as I can and not worry.
Are you writing in longhand? I mean, how are you
I write on a
working?
computer,
Okay,
and
right.
then or whatever happens to be around. Sometimes I do on sticky notes or whatever, and I just write it down and then I just let it sit. And probably 90% of the time, it's not really as great as I thought it would be. But sometimes there's a germ of that makes its way into the story, or a character, a little spark of the character's personality that's useful that I build on.
Brian, do you have like a roadmap with your workings?
No, what I do is I give myself permission to have the first ugly draft, is what I call it. That when I hit those epiphanies, as you guys are talking about, I just start typing and I just let it flow, and I don't judge it, I don't critique it, I really don't stop until I've really gotten to that point where, okay, I think I've said what was spilling out inside of me. So I just try to stay with the flow, and I like to think that there's a muse that we're playing with, and that the muse, okay, has popped its head out and it's trying to get outside of me, and my job is just to kind of keep up with the muse. Yeah. And then after that first ugly draft is spilled onto the page, then I go back and I have that same experience of, oh my God, this isn't really as good as I'd like. And sometimes I'm tempted to throw it away. But then if I stick with it, it's like, well, wait a minute, there's some nuggets here. And then I go back and all of a sudden I feel like I'm clicking again in that editor mode. So I think for me, it's giving myself permission to just have the first ugly draft, basically.
Great.
So.
How about your style, Sue?
Well, and that's true. As a journalist all these years, you have to write. You know, you have to write now. You can't wait for the muse to hit you. You have to write right now, and you have to get it done in a half hour or whatever. And so I'm used to doing that, but I'm also used to editing. And so I'm really not a writer, I'm a rewriter. And I write it down, and then I go back and I fix it, and I fix it, and I fix it, and I fix it.
You bet. How do you come up with the title of your book? I'll start with you, Sue.
Well, actually, Laughing for a Living that's what, when people would say, you know, ask about my job, I'd say I call it Laughing for a Living, because I was a theater reviewer, and that's what I did. I spent Thursday and Friday nights in an aisle seat working hard, you know, laughing.
Not a bad deal.
And so actually it started with the title. It started with that phrase that I would use all the time, that I would tell people I call it Laughing for a Living, and then I thought, oh, that sounds like a title of something, but what would it be the title of, you know? And so then I kind of shopped around as to what stories would fit with that title. And Great News Town, that's journalism jargon. When you know, when I worked in Joliet, Illinois, everybody said, oh, Joliet's a great news town. I mean, that's the first thing any other journalist would say to me is, where are you to work? I work in Joliet. Oh, Joliet's a great news town, you know. And it's just something that people say all the time in journalism.
How about your long title?
Yeah, it is long. I sort of regret that now.
No, that's not a bad thing. It's a unique thing.
Well, I'd already written the story, and the story starts out, it says, Henry Alfred Grummerson is the great-great-great-great-great-grandson of King Arthur. And so it sort of made sense. So King Arthur's very great-grandson, it's sort of a double meaning. And it fits the characters, the heroes, the little hero's personality, too.
Yeah.
So.
How about Pillars of Steel? That what, chicken or egg there?
Yeah, it was actually started with the image. As I was writing, the image of two men who are arm wrestling, but also not just arm wrestling. There's a strength there, but also embracing their hands. That was an image I just Googled and just set that out there, basically. And then my wife suffered through all the different drafts of the book. And I told her I was kind of struggling with what to call the book, and she looked at the image, and actually my wife came up with it. She said, what about, well, she said Pillars of Strength. And I thought, that's great, you know, Pillars of Strength, because that's what society's kind of robbing from men as we go through this redefinition. But then I came up with the tagline, how real men draw strength from each other, so I couldn't use it double, so I switched it to Pillars of Steel, how real men draw strength from each other. But I use other, you know, my wife has been the best person to help kind of bounce ideas off, and she pulls them out of a hat for me. So.
You know, we do want, you know, local purchases, to use our local stores, obviously, but what has Amazon done for either you or for this business, Ken?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's the nice thing about Amazon is that the reviews they put some reviews up there, you know, like from publications, but then also people can write in reviews.
And that's out of your control, right? You could get a very positive or a very negative review.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily a good thing. In my case, it's been nice, but it is unfortunate that the great bookstores sometimes suffer the loss, and booksellers, the people that know books and love books, sometimes don't get used as much as they should be, because they're great sources.
Yeah. And Sue, do you have to be proactive? Do you contact Amazon to have that? How do you actually get on Amazon.com?
Well, no, actually, Lulu and it happened pretty automatically.
It worked, yeah.
Getting on Amazon was automatic. Amazon's a great seller, and so they sell the books and the Kindle. That sells even better. It's like I say, you can sell all over the world on Kindle. So,
bottom line, right? Another caller from you, perhaps our last. Hi, what's your question, please?
Hi, I have a question for Brian. How did it affect the way you look at your own personal masculinity to be working on a project on masculinity in general?
Yeah, good question. I think what it really helped me in a very effective way, because it caused me to look at what are the ways that I limit myself to the man code, like with my buddies and my friends. And as I'm writing about breaking the man code, I'm realizing I gotta live what I'm writing, basically. So not only with my sons, where I encourage them, because we've always had a good relationship and we would talk at those deeper levels, but now with my friends. And it helped me go back and say, well, who are the guys, I call them spiritual friendships, who are the men that I have spiritual friendships with, or that I want to develop spiritual friendships with, and what does that look like? So I think what it has in answer to your question, it's helped me put my money where my mouth is. If I'm going to write about this and research it and feel it, then it's also been a great way for me to learn to live it. And I think it's really changed my life. I have, now that my 3 sons are grown, they were my best buddies growing up, and now they're off to college and they're doing their own thing, careers and all. And so it's forced me as a man to say, I can't rely upon my sons. Now I need to develop these stronger spiritual friendships. And so it's really invited me to move into that new space for me.
Great. Where do we find your book signing, and where is your website, please?
Sure. The next, at Amazon, or I'm sorry, at Schuler's Bookstore on Saturday, August 25th from 9:30 to 11:30, we're actually going to do a workshop. It's about a 2-hour having the courage to break the man code, and we'll have some small group work. So that'll be Alpine Schuler's on Saturday, August 25th from 9:30 to 11:30. And then the Pillars of Steel book is available on Amazon.com also. And really, my book, I don't have a website. I'm working on it, trying to decide where to do with it. So it would be my my individual email would
Yes.
be _plakta@yahoo.com.
Great. Same question to you, Sue.
Well, let's see. Next week, I'm going to be speaking at Women's City Club next Thursday. The book is available at Amazon.com, Lulu.com, Schuler's, and I have lots of blogs. I have laughingforaliving.blogspot.com. I have greatnewstown.blogspot.com. And Great Newstown is also available as a serial, one chapter at a time,
Okay.
and that's greatnewsserial.blogspot.com.
Nice. Quick 30 seconds from you, Ken.
I'll be at Pooh's Corner this September, and my website is kennethcraigle.com. And you can find out the details about the Pooh's Corner reading there or on their website as well.
Another book in you, yes or no?
Yep.
Another book in you, Sue?
By Christmas.
Another book in you,
Definitely
Brian?
next year.
Is there a book in all of us?
Yes, definitely.
There we are.
Right.
Thank you very much. Of course, you, Kenneth Craigle, Sue Merrill, Brian Plakta, get you branded. And of course, thank you for all of your calls tonight. That's what this is all about. Good luck. Read a book.
W